Chair, the beginning may begin. We are live.
Members, turn on your mics. And good evening, everyone. I am calling this meeting of the Historic Districts Review Board to order. Today we are March the 14th, 2023. Melissa, good evening. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Rios,
Here.
Vice Chair Guida,
Here.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Here.
Member Berkeley,
Excused.
Member Beachside,
Excused.
Member Bienvenue,
Here.
Member Larson.
Excused.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair, there are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you very much. We have minutes of February the 28th, 2023. Board members.
Madam Chair, were you going to do a motion for the agenda?
Oh, yes. Moving right along. I guess I want to get this over with quickly. Is the
Guida moves to approve the agenda.
Aguilar Madrana seconds.
Madam Chair.
roll call vote?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Attorney Rubali, did you have something?
To the minutes when you
Oh,
ask
okay.
for amendment.
And now we are on the minutes of February the 28th, 2023. Any changes? If so, please state them now.
Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
With respect to the minutes on page 18 and the last sentence at the bottom of the page, the sentence that starts with however subsection 2C4, I believe that should read section 14-5.2 C4. The top of page 19, the first full sentence, it reads, he concluded that there are special restrictions to contributing structures that apply to all structures. I believe that should read, he concluded that there are special restrictions to contributing structures that do not apply to all structures. And I don't know if I misspoke or those words got left out, but that would be a misstatement of law. It should read to contributing structures that do not apply to all structures.
Is that it, Attorney Rubali?
That's all I have,
Thank you.
Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 14, paragraph 7, if you could change the last sentence to read, the historic building inventory lists the status as significant. So she was wondering why this is not being proposed. That's all.
Is that all? Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 6, the first full paragraph in paragraph F, the sentence now reads, the board's understanding is previously that this would come before the board, before decisions. Change that to the board's understanding, strike is, then continue previously, add the word was, that this would come before the board, before decisions. The next sentence where it says he thought this is an incorrect interpretation, change that to read, he thought the city's current position is an incorrect interpretation. I think that's all for minutes.
Thank you, Member Benvenu. If there is nothing else, I will entertain a motion.
Guida moves to approve the minutes as amended.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have 7 findings of fact and conclusions of law. Are there any changes to any of these? Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case number 2023-6286 HDRB 1564 Canyon Road, under findings of fact, I would ask that a new paragraph 9 be added with the following language, which is taken from the minutes of the wording of the motion. Add the board notes that the ground mounted solar array is currently screened from public view by the existing vegetation. That's all I have.
There's nothing further. Is there a motion to approve?
Guida moves to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law as amended.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenu,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Matters from the public. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to come forward and speak on anything?
There's just a piece of chocolate here. I was asking if it was for me.
It is.
Anyway, Stephanie Benenato. I want to just say that I'm extremely disappointed with your decision on St. John's College. I really feel that you did not follow process and you did not follow the law. And it's discouraging to me to see it being so subjective. And if it's going to be that subjective, then really, I don't understand why we have this. You're supposed to be applying the law. The law is about structures and buildings and outer facades. It has nothing really to do with internal walls that could have been worked around. You didn't look at alternatives for St. John's. And to think that when your findings of fact say there'll be no impact on the significant structure, even though in the very same sentence, it's saying that they're going to remove historic material, meaning walls and doors and windows. So if you took away what's the proposed additions, you'd have these very much no longer untouched facades, but very much touched facades. In fact, you'd have gaping holes, and the architect restoring them is not preserving the virtually untouched facades. And it was really actually disgusting to me to listen to that architect rant on about, how his due process is violated and it's a ridiculous ordinance. And, you better hurry up and do this. And if you don't approve it, he's going to destroy the wall, the interior wall, which I think would have lost him his license. I'm not sure, but it should have. So it seemed like you caved into that kind of stuff instead of saying, we need a status review. It may take 2 weeks. It may take a month, but that's what we actually need to do if we all don't think that it should be significant anymore. Not play games with pretending to preserve an interior wall in exchange for having
2 minutes, Madam Chair.
exterior walls being destroyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate Member Guida that you're calling the 2 minutes, but I had not said a thing about 2 minutes. And I think the chair is the person that is responsible for calling someone when they're speaking to stop speaking. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak, reference matters from the public? Anyone on Zoom, Heather?
No, Chair Rios.
Thank you. Anything under staff communications?
Chair Rios, we have sent out correspondence. We'll be sending out the nomination forms for the annual preservation awards. And there are different categories of awards. We would like to get nominations by March 31st, the nomination form. We received something already from Member Berkeley. And we would like to get those nominations by March 31st. So you'll be getting an email regarding that. The awards include architectural preservation, compatible remodel, compatible new construction, an archaeology award, which we'll be working with the Archaeological Review Committee, a cultural preservation award, and the mayor will also be granting an award for exceptional contribution to the preservation and understanding of the city's history. If you have some suggestions, please let me know and I can forward that along to the mayor. So you should be expecting that in your inbox soon.
Thank you. And do we have a date for the awards?
Just one moment. I will check that and get back with you, Chair Rios.
Thank you. We have nothing under old business, but we have 7 cases under new business. And I do need to inform everyone that if you disagree with the decision that this board makes, you do have the option to appeal to the city council. You do have to follow certain rules in reference to that. And that is that the findings and conclusions have to be approved prior to your going to the city council, you have 15 days in reference to that. Also, I will ask Melissa if she will help me with the 2-minute limit. But if someone is speaking and the 2 minutes have passed and they need to finish their train of thought, I don't see anything wrong, and I will be the person that decides whether they can go forward with another little extra time. And Melissa will notify me when the 2 minutes is up. Thank you, everyone. The first case is located at 57 Old Santa Fe Trail. And I see that the applicant is here, and this is Heather's case. Heather, may we hear your report, please?
Chair Rios, just one aside, the Historic Preservation Awards are going to be held May 18th at the San Miguel Chapel.
Okay, thank you. May 18th, everyone. Everyone's invited. The public is invited to that.
Just one moment while I share my screen. Okay, thank you, Chair Rios, members of the board. Good evening. I'm here to present to you the second installment of the Lucchese sign exception request. If you may recall, when you last heard this, the exception criteria dealt with design and preservation, and there were no exception criteria as it relates to height and also to letter size and overall square footage. Those criteria are called out in a special section of the sign ordinance that applies specifically to the historic districts. On January 3rd, 2023, this case was reviewed by the Board of Adjustment. Underlying zoning per the historic district's regulations require that a sign be no higher than 15 feet. And the Board of Adjustment approved the proposed sign height, as you will see this evening. The site is located on the east side of the plaza in a contributing building, and it once was the First National Bank of Santa Fe, which has since moved over to the other side of the plaza. And so it originally had a neoclassical style. So this is an illustration of the sign as it is proposed. The picture to the right illustrates the visibility of the sign if it were to comply with code with that 15-foot height max. And here's an illustration or a picture of the original bank building, the neoclassical style. During the 1960s and late 50s, there was a movement within the city of Santa Fe to keep Santa Fe's architectural integrity as it was historically. And so John Galmeme, amongst others, began a plaza renovation program. When the First National Bank left this particular building, it was remodeled to have a recent Spanish revival style, due to the height of the building and sort of the unique nature of it. This was sort of the solution, and it was then occupied by Levine's department store. In 1966, the plaza portals were constructed around the plaza, and you can see this is a cantilevered metal element that is located that covered the sidewalk with the Levines, which has since been replaced with the portal, as you can see here. So as to the code framework, the board may grant exceptions to height, and in this particular section also has height, pitch, and scale. So height and scale are the two operative words here. So the scale of the sign and, the dimensions that are being given to it, and the height of the sign as well. So as I mentioned, the Board of Adjustment heard this on January 3rd and approved this sign height. And the proposed top of the sign, the height will be 19 feet 6 inches, which is higher than that 15-foot permitted height. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, the Historic Districts Review Board reviewed it for design. So this evening, we're going to be doing a positive finding for height and determine whether the exception criteria have been met. There's two distinct exception criteria. between design and height. Design is the 3 criteria, is less onerous. The height has 6 criteria. The applicant has addressed all of those criteria in their letter of introduction. This photograph is not Lucchese as it's prosed here in Santa Fe, but I did want you to have a reference for how a sign looks on the building. So that way you can see, I don't know the scale of this or what have you, but as to the font and the appearance, I thought this might be helpful to the board. So the board has the authority to grant an exception, and the sign will not damage the character of the streetscape. It is not contrary to the public interest and does not impact public safety, health, and welfare, and that it will be constructed and secured to the building. It provides for design options so that residents can continue to live and have shopping opportunities nearby in the historic districts. Is due to a special circumstance, which is the building and its history, where signage may be placed on that second story. It does not impact any architectural detailing nor does it impact the contributing status. These special circumstances are the result of Lucchese's actions, and it provides for less of an impact in that the sign is smaller, although it does not comply with H district criteria. It does comply with all other standards related to design and so on, as was also endorsed by the board at the last meeting. So that concludes the staff presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have one question. Are there any other buildings in the plaza that have signage that is as large as the Lucchese sign, what they are wanting to have, and that is on the building itself?
Chair Rios, there are not many opportunities for wall signs is with the building immediately to the north of the Lucchese site. There's architectural detailing and windows and the like, brick on most of the buildings that surround the plaza already. So the only other sign is that well, it used to be called First National Bank of Santa Fe, but I think it's something different now. But there is a sign on that western side of the plaza. And let me go back to the aerial. It's right off this aerial, but that's the location of that particular sign. That's the only other one. There would be no opportunity for a sign on the governor of the Palace of the Governors, and there's no other wall signage located on the east side. South side of the plaza.
Thank you, Heather. Board members, do you have any other questions, any clarification? Yes, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was one of my questions, so thank you for already asking it. My other question, Heather, if the height were reduced to be in compliance, which I think is it 15 inches?
Yes.
Would that also make the square footage in compliance if it shrunk so that that height was 15 inches? Have you guys done that calculation?
Chair Rios, Member Aguilar Medrano, I will do a quick calculation. So you're talking about the height of the letters themselves?
Yeah, so if, proportionally, if the word was scaled down so that the height criteria was met, I'm just curious if the square footage is also met at that point as well.
I will do a calculation and get back with you.
Okay, thank you.
If there's nothing further, will the applicant please come forward and get sworn in?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Jennifer Jenkins, 130 Grant Avenue, Suite 101. Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. I'm Jennifer Jenkins with Jenkins Gavin here this evening again on behalf of Lucchese with respect to requested exceptions to the historic district regulations as they pertain to signage. I'm going to go ahead and plug myself in. I'm going to unplug this one and You need to. There we go. It's clicking in. Right, Heather covered all of this quite well, but I'm just going to go through a few items and some background. It's been an interesting case so far, I will say that. So as Heather mentioned, the property is on the east side of the plaza, the current location of the Lucchese Boot Store. And we are in the downtown East Side Historic District. And you know, Heather, I was going to ask the board, my records indicate the building is non-contributing. And so you mentioned that it was contributing, and it's a question because our records have always indicated the building is non-contributing. So I just wanted to mention that. So here's a little piece of background. So we submitted an application last June for exceptions to the historic district's regulations in order to replace and shrink the existing Lucchese sign. Lucchese has rebranded themselves, and so it's kind of a standard thing with retailers that they do need to update their branding occasionally. We came before this body on August 9th, and the exceptions were approved to allow the replacement sign to move forward. We were then notified by the city attorney's office that it was determined that this body actually did not have jurisdiction over signage regulations per chapter 14. So we were instructed to submit a variance application through the land use department to be reviewed by the Board of Adjustment. So we did that. We requested variances to the same regulations that we're talking about this evening. And we went to the Board of Adjustment. Those variances were approved. And then we were notified that actually it appears that the board does have jurisdiction, but that we needed to reapply. So we were covering all 6 of the approval criteria that would incorporate the height exception, not just the 3 design criteria that were approved previously. So we submitted a revised application, and that's what brings us here today. So what you see on the left side of the table here are the standards that are referred to in the historic regulations, because the specificity of these standards aren't called out in the historic regs. It points to 14-8 in chapter 14 and that's why we're here with these exceptions. So sign area, the maximum permissible is 20 feet. In terms of the square footage of the sign area. The existing sign is 70 square feet. And that the existing sign was approved also by the Historic Districts Review Board in 2011 via the granting of exceptions for the existing sign. The proposed square footage is 34 square feet. So that is a reduction in size of over 50%. Letter size, the maximum is 20 inches. The existing sign, the largest letter, which is the L, is 5 feet. And all of the letters are the same size in the new proposed sign and to a maximum height of 24 inches. This is a reduction of 60%. And then lastly, we have sign height. So that's the mounting height of the sign measured to the top of the sign. The maximum is 15 feet. The existing is 21. The proposed is 19.6, so that's a reduction of 7%. So with this application, the sign is getting smaller and more compliant. So these similar images that Heather showed you, you can see the sign standing on the south side of the plaza, kind of looking to the northeast. And then on the other side, kind of looking to the southeast. And you can see the portal here that was added, that this is actually not on our property. The portal is actually, the property line for this store is at the edge of the walkway. So the city of Santa Fe owns the portal. So we have no rights of displaying signage on the front of the portal. So the building looks very different than it did originally. It was the First National Bank in a very neoclassical Greco-Roman style. And then it was reconstructed and redesigned by John Gamin for the Levine's department store with the intent that this facade area is designed specifically to accommodate a sign. And so this was the Levine's department store that was there, and the sign that, this was the rendering that, that Mr. Meem prepared, and this was a photograph of the actual built conditions. And this is just a rendering of that same sign. This is the existing sign. So you can just see comparatively, the existing sign is quite a bit smaller than the historic sign. And this is the existing condition with dimensions. And this is the proposed sign, also dimensioned here for reference. And what is really critical and most critical to this discussion is this. This is a compliant sign. It does not meet the intent of the sign. The signage regulations are very clear in Chapter 14 about what is the intent of signage. The intent of signage is for business identification and wayfinding. This does not accomplish that. We have a very unique situation here with the design of this building, the location of the portal. So it would be impossible to mount a sign that would be visible to the public, meeting the intent of the sign regulations, and do that in compliance with Chapter 14. So I respectfully request your support once again of this request, so we can bring the sign closer into compliance with the regulations and provide adequate identification for this plaza business. So I appreciate your attention. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Jennifer, thank you for your very thorough presentation. My question is, if the lettering was in compliance with what the ordinance says, and you moved it up, that a possibility, and you still have the lettering would be in compliance and it would still be able to be seen?
Seen-ish, part of we worked on these sign dimensions quite a bit. So one element that we're trying to achieve is some degree of proportionality with this facade. And size in this instance is critical. So the mounting height, obviously, as you point out, is critically important, but you shrink it and then it starts to dilute even the impact of having a proper mounting height. So we feel that when you have a 20-inch maximum, we're at 24, we think that's a very modest request, considering the impact of the portal on the visibility. And so we would respectfully request an opportunity, as was previously approved, to move forward with the 24 inches. It's substantially smaller than what's there now. But it does make a difference. We did a lot of side-by-side comparisons, and we really looked at how small can we possibly make it and have it still function and serve its purpose. And that's how we landed on the 24. The client wanted, you were seeing the first go, like we want this. And I'm like, you're not going to have that. We need to, so we really worked very hard with our client to design a sign that we feel like is proper and proportional to the structure.
So the lettering is within 9 inches of falling under the ordinance?
Well, it's actually 20 inches is the maximum on the lettering. And so we're at 24 on the
We're at
lettering.
24.
Yes, so we're 4 inches off.
Other questions or comments? None at this time. Anyone from the public wishing to comment in reference to this project?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Stephanie Beninatto, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico. You and the Board of Adjustment have wasted a lot of time on the sign nonconformity here. Ms. Lamboy and the city attorney has failed to point out to you 1452A6. I brought this up at the BOA meeting and the city attorney for Gelly said that 1452A6 had nothing to do with signage. But in fact, and I've now memorized the sentences that apply, which are the third and fourth sentences of that subsection. And they say that structures other than buildings, including signs that do not comply with architectural standards or sign standards are considered non-conforming structures. And these structures may not be altered or repaired, only removed. This sign, and so I immediately contacted the city attorney after the BOA void vote, that is ultra virus vote, because they were told the wrong law. They seem to think that a less non-conforming sign that they could approve it. You cannot approve a non-conforming sign, period. And you might remember that in January, when I brought this up to you about the BOA, Ms. Lamboy assured you all that the lettering and the area was going to be conforming. It is not. We have 25% higher letter signs. We have 65% bigger area, and we have something like 35% increase in height. So again, this has been a total waste of time. When you did vote for it, it was a 2-1 vote with a quorum of 4. Mr. Bienvenu voted against it. And so therefore, again, this whole vote has been a waste of time, void, and not allowed by 1452A6 sentences 3 and 4. Thank you.
Thank you. I,
May I make a suggestion, please, Madam Chair? Could the previous speaker's issue be discussed a little bit before I think she needs to be addressed by perhaps legal counsel? I don't know. Do you want me to go ahead and,
no, I'd rather that you go ahead. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Eddy, number 14 Avenida Campo Verde, 87506. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the legalities addressed by the previous speaker do need to be addressed here. So I would like to see that happen. My take on this is very simple because I tend to look at these things very simply. This is a matter of scale of branding. And I think it's inappropriate to grant scale of branding by a national firm on historic buildings in Santa Fe. Whether or not this building is contributing on some level is both irrelevant and unfortunate because all of the buildings on the plaza need to go through status review. Very few of them have. So that's something that we need to take care of. But if these letters are too large, they fit in the massing as has been described. And it's like a blank canvas. And whenever there's a blank canvas, you've got to fill it. But it's inappropriate to bring lettering this size in this space, I believe. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak on this particular project? We have anyone on Zoom?
Chair Rios, there was one hand up, but it's been lowered. Is there anybody on Zoom who wish to speak? Please raise your hand. No, Chair Rios.
It appears that there is no more further public comment. So I will ask board members if they have any questions or if they want to make a motion at this time. Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question preliminarily. Excuse me, I have allergies right now. So sorry if I cough. The question that, or the statement that was made by Ms. Beninato about non-conforming structures. Can that be addressed? Because the version I have of the code just refers to structures. But she was indicating that her version of the code refers to structures and signs. Is that the case?
If you're directing your question to me, Member Bienvenue, thank you, Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, the section I have, which is 14-5.2A6, does refer to signs. There are several sentences and it reads, any building in the historic district not meeting the standards for architectural style set forth in this section, unless given special approval by the board for architectural or historic interest, or unless individually entered in the State Register of Cultural Properties or in the National Register of Historic Places or designated as significant on either register, shall be considered non-conforming. Except for repairs and maintenance required by law, no non-conforming building may be added to or altered in any way unless the proposed addition or alteration will bring the whole to a degree of conformity acceptable to the board. Structures other than buildings, including signs not conforming to the architectural style or sign standards set forth in this section, shall be considered non-conforming. No alteration or repair may be made of any such structure other than its removal. No non-conforming structure in the historic district which has been damaged by fire, explosion, act of God, or the public enemy to the extent of more than 50% of its value, exclusive of basement or cellar, shall be restored except in conformity with the requirements of this section.
Appreciate that. So what's staff's view on the applicability of that provision in this case?
Chair Rios, Member Bienvenue, with reference to the statements that were made by Mr. Ubalid, non-conforming structures are existing structures. So in this particular case, the Lucchese sign is non-conforming. So with its removal, there will be conformity in that there's a blank wall, but the board can consider exceptions to the ordinance. The board has authority to do so. And so if the sign were erected with an exception and approval by this board, then it would conform. Well, it would be considered non-conforming, but it would be considered have been approved. So if the sign, for instance, were removed, then a future applicant would have to reapply for an exception. Say, for instance, if a Sears were to go on the site and they wanted to sign that same area, then they would have to come back and request their own exception. Exceptions are specific to applicants, not to buildings, and are not in perpetuity.
Okay. My view continues that the exception criteria have not been met in any event, but prepared to make a motion whenever, but I appreciate that explanation. I think that's an additional consideration, but I agree with you that it's not overcomable in the right circumstances.
So, yes, Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question if Heather, you were able to get that calculation before a motion is made.
In my Chair Rios Commissioner, I'm sorry, Board Member Madeline Aguilar Medrano, the square footage would still be approximately 22 square feet, which is greater than the 20 square feet. And the code requires a maximum of 20 inches. The applicant is proposing 24 inches. So be roughly half. Well, it would be roughly so it's 17 feet wide. So it would be roughly 22 square feet by my calculation, but Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong. Also, with reference to the historic status of the building, it is non-contributing, but Mr. Eddy was correct in that many of the buildings have not been resurveyed on the plaza. And so it was my, I misspoke as to the status. But certainly the changes that have been made at this point are considered historic, just for reference.
Okay, thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Anything further, Member Guida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a few thoughts about this case because it distresses me greatly. I I understand we're approving a portion, or potentially approving a portion of the exception criteria for signs with regard to height, scale, and area of the sign tonight. You know, with regard to exceptions, there's a lot of differing opinions among the board and expressed by the public about when exceptions should be granted in general by this board, whether it's design exceptions or sign exceptions. To me, it seems incredibly obvious that this is a case for which our design exceptions process is made for. This is a building that was designed by Saint John Galmeme himself in the 1950s. The facade was designed to have a much bigger sign in this place, and that sign has changed over years as businesses have changed. We would be hearing this case if Lucchese was no longer in business, as has been pointed out, or if another business took over that space. Scale and proportion, relationship to that original design that was considered, that was done by one of the authors of our style control ordinance. Those are the things that we should be considering and reviewing an exception for this sign. Also, we should be considering the preservation aspect of this, that, you know, in my view, a sign in a space that was designed in the 1950s by a significant architect in this community, you know, putting a sign back that matches that intent, that matches that time period, and that is in proportion with the design facade of the building is extremely important. All of those things contribute to a reasonable accommodation of exceptions. That this case tonight has seen previously the review of 3 exceptions when it was reviewed earlier, and an additional 18 exceptions tonight for the 3 factors that we're considering is patently absurd and points to the revisions that are needed in our ordinance. Something that makes sense so clearly that should be so difficult to do is, to me, quite absurd. It's also the case that that, you know, process in this case has been really a mess. You know, we have this continued confusion where the city attorney or the assistant city attorney is being asked to interpret land use code. That is not the authority of the city attorney's office per chapter 14. It is the authority of the land use director, and it's made very clearly. The land use department, the land use director, and by extension, staff are the ones who interpret land use code. And what's happened in this case is that the city attorney's office has gone around on multiple occasions, the land use departments, both the historic preservation division manager and the assistant land use director's interpretation of code in this case. That's not okay. That the city attorney has also given the applicant conflicting guidance and interpretation on top of that is equally problematic. I also find problematic that our public discourse about design, preservation, and what's appropriate for our historic districts is at an all-time low. We're only talking about these legal issues and the wording of the law and not the intent. So to me, it's a really distressing development and is in conflict with what this board was set up to do, what this ordinance is attempting to achieve, and what we should be looking at in terms of congruity with our historic districts. Thank you for the time.
In reference to the size of the lettering of the Levines, I think that was done prior to the 1957 ordinance being adopted. That lettering, which was huge, was done, I believe, that I read in 1954. And That was prior to the, as you all know, the 57 ordinance being adopted. So for you to compare that lettering with the Lucchese lettering is
It speaks to design intent, Madam Chair, and proportion is what the argument for the exceptions are being made on. And I think this board has reviewed design proposals before and has the ability, and I hope the good design sense, to recommend or approve exceptions based on design considerations.
and I'm making a comparison between what was there and then what came to be in 2011 that the board approved with the Lucchese sign. But anyway, anything further? Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, yeah, not to rehash all the same arguments we made before, I'm just not convinced by the invocation of John Gahmeem's name that decides this case. I mean, as we all know, as the chair just pointed out, this design was in 1954 prior to any preservation ordinances. The preservation ordinance governing signs, once it was enacted in 1957, specifically states signs excessive in size will defeat the purpose of preservation in this, the oldest capital in the United States. Now, secondly, John Gahmeem's a professional architect, and we don't know that this is his design sense so much as a response to a client's desires, because this is essentially a billboard, and it has been a billboard since the time that a special approval was given to it in 2011. It's not necessary for wayfinding purposes. I would be very surprised if someone is lost on the plaza looking for that store until they see this sign on the building. No other stores have wayfinding signs of that magnitude. And it's just counter to 3, if not 4, of the specific requirements set forth in our ordinance regarding signs in the historic districts: size of lettering, size of the entire sign altogether, the height of the sign, I think potentially the color, because the color is also called out in the ordinance to be at least one of the colors in the sign is supposed to be of the color of the building, which is not the case here. So 3, if not 4 exception criteria would be needed in this particular instance in order to approve this. And I'm just, again, not persuaded that the scale is of an issue either. That is a large blank wall. There are lots of large blank walls in Santa Fe. That does not mean that people get special dispensation to put large logos on them. I remember in the 90s when a lot of national chains moved into Santa Fe, we had Gap and Banana Republic on the plaza. And I doubt that if the Gap wanted to put a sign of this magnitude on that particular storefront, the people would accept that as legitimate on our historic plaza. So again, with the non-conforming aspect of the sign, recognizing that it was approved, which I think was a grievous error of the board in approving that for the current Lucchese sign, this is the time that can be corrected with no prejudice, in my opinion, to the applicant. They still have a sign. They can have a sign that's 20 inches tall, exactly as set forth in the ordinance, that meets these standards of square footage, and that possibly needs to be raised. The one area where I think an exception might be grantable would be because of the portal having the height be somewhat higher than it otherwise would be, to avoid the oddity of resting that sign directly on the portal. I would also be willing to accept the color because I think it's a muted blue and it's their logo. There are other colors around the plaza. So in my opinion, all the needs other than just pure advertising can be met by the applicant with a sign that meets the code, but that does have a dispensation to allow a somewhat higher sign than would otherwise be the case, and in the blue color of their logo.
Thank you. New. Anything else, members of the board? And Jennifer, seems like you want to say something.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it, and board members. I think the crux of kind of what we're discussing here is maybe it comes down to preference. If you prefer the existing sign, or if you would prefer a sign that is 50% smaller, that is really that is the question, frankly, that is before you. We feel, and staff concurs, that we have met all of the exception criteria. It was determined by this board several months ago that we met the first three already. It's determined by the Board of Adjustment that we met all the variance criteria. So we have met it all. So the question before us this evening is really the question of height with respect to those additional criteria. I think we can all agree that the height is problematic, as Board Member Vigneault aptly pointed out. But it's really about an opportunity. This is an opportunity to get a much subtler presence on that facade. The Levine sign was what it was. And yes, it was a historic condition, a non-compliant historic condition. So when the historic regs were adopted, that sign became non-conforming as well. But most of our historic buildings were built prior to the adoption of the historic regulations. So it was a historic condition. We have no interest in replicating that historic condition, but it's part of the context for why this building was designed the way it was. That's all. That is all. So we have a building, and the sign should be appropriate. And if you're really going to talk about appropriate proportionality, it probably should be a lot bigger. But we're not asking for that. We're asking for a very modest increase in size to ensure apt visibility. And whether or not this is a national chain or a local business, every business is entitled to proper identification. Everybody's entitled to that. It's part of doing business. It's part of what drives the economy of this community, especially our downtown economy. So if you prefer the current sign, that's fine. Then you can make a decision that reflects that. But I don't really believe you do. I think we can all, I'm going to go on a limb here, but we can all agree that the proposed sign is a huge improvement. It's 50% smaller than what's there right now. It is a huge improvement. It's an effort to support a business that benefits this economy, allowing them to change their logo. It happens. And in doing so, we bring this sign so much closer to compliance while letting it be seen, because that's the intent.
So question, are you indicating that if the proposal that you have before us this evening doesn't go through, that Lucchese will keep the lettering as is?
I think it's highly likely, yes.
Okay, I thought that you also indicated that they were wanting to kind of change their
No question, that is their preference, but then they
lettering.
have to balance. They would have to balance that. So if we cannot achieve the exceptions, then that's a decision point for Lucchese, where we would have to look at, okay, this is the sign that was approved. This is the existing sign, and then they would have a choice to make at that point, whether or not to proceed with the sign replacement.
Thank you. Yes, Member Guido.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, we have an exceptions process, right? So there are things that are out of compliance, and that's going to happen a lot. The exceptions process grants the board the authority to rule, or at least until recently, on design exceptions that make sense, that are reasonable, that fit the intent of the ordinance, if not the letter of the law. So to me, I really object to this idea that exceptions cannot happen, that they're only rare and only in special circumstances. This is a special circumstance. The board has the authority and the expertise to grant those exceptions based on the intent of the law. I think the question, for me, tonight is also, do we care more about the letter of the ordinance or the quality of design, the scale, and, having a sign that meets the letter of the law, but is too small for the space that it's in. I think that, that we should keep our priorities straight here. The look of the historic districts, the quality of the work in our historic districts is what matters far more than a flawed ordinance. Thank you.
And if there is nothing further, I will entertain a motion. Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I do, I just want to get clarification. My understanding of the staff report is that staff did not find that the exception criteria has been met with respect to whether the application, the proposal is required to prevent a hardship to the applicant or an injury to the public welfare. Is that correct?
Chair Rios, Member Bienvenu, that is correct. There is no injury to the public welfare as they must comply with standards relative to construction. But there are different interpretations on what hardship is. And in staff's opinion, this particular case where they would not be able to have any sign may be considered a hardship, but I will leave that up to the judgment of the board.
Right, but just to be clear, your staff's recommendation is that that criteria has not been met in this case, correct?
Chair, Member Bienvenu, the portion of the criteria regarding hardship has not been met. The portion of public welfare has.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion. In case number 2023-006437 HDRB, 57 Old Santa Fe Trail. I move that findings be entered that consistent with staff's recommendation. All of the criteria for an exception have not been met in this case. Specifically with regard to staff's recommendation that there is no harm to the applicant if this request is denied. I would also find in addition that the other criteria have not been met in this case. And in fact, would find that the excessive sign size and letter size would damage the character of the streetscape on the historic plaza, contrary to the specific intent of the sign ordinance governing historic districts. Again, that it is not necessary to prevent any hardship to the applicant or an injury to the public welfare, and in fact would cause an injury to the public welfare. That it does not strengthen the unique heterogeneous character of the city by providing a full range of design options. I would find that it's not due, that the criteria that its request is not due to special conditions and circumstances which are a result of the actions of the applicant has been found. I would find that this is not the least negative impact that could be provided under different design criteria. Based on that, I would have findings entered that the criteria have not been met for an exception for the size of the letters or the square feet of the proposed sign. However, I would move that the application be otherwise approved on the condition that the letter size be reduced to 20 inches, consistent with the ordinance, the square footage consistent with the ordinance, and that the height may be granted to be the height requested in the application due to the condition of the portal, and also that the color can be the blue that was proposed by the applicant. I hope I covered everything.
So second to this motion.
Aguilar Madrano will second.
Anything further to add? Nothing further. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Madrano.
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
No.
Madam Chair, it's 2-1. The motion has been approved.
Thank you. And we will go on to the next case, which is located at 650 Canyon Road. This is for a status review, and Ramon, you have the floor.
Yes. Just give me 1 minute to get this laptop set up. Okay, Madam Chair and members of the board, this is case 2023006399. And that's for the status review. I'd like to present both the status review and the proposed demolition with the same PowerPoint. I wish I could make this screen large.
Ramon, we have these listed, as you know, as two separate cases.
Yes, they are listed as
And
two
so
separate
we will
cases.
make, of course, two different motions under the case numbers.
Correct. So again, that's 2003-006399, which is the status review, and the 2003-006400 is for the proposed demolition. Okay. So the location is on right on Canyon Road, 650, a little bit farther to the east, kind of across the street from the compound. And the circle shows the exact property. It's 650. This is an aerial of the site with the shed highlighted in the red rectangles. This is an aerial from 1978 that shows what was the condition of the roof and the parapets at that period of time. The estimated construction was prior to 1958. Here's the north and east elevations, and the south elevation. It sits really close to the property line, so it's kind of hard to get a shot of the west elevation. This is the interior south wall and window and interior west wall and window. We had our building inspector go by and take a look at it, and he described the condition as poor, existing condition. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have regarding either of these cases. Oh, I should give you my suggestions, my recommendation. For the status, the staff recommends that the historic status of the structure be designated as non-contributing per 14-5.2C. And as far as the demolition goes, staff recommends approval of this demolition.
Can you tell us again the date of the structure?
It was built prior to 1958, but it was significantly modified in the 90s when their parapets were knocked down and a shed roof was put on top of it.
You agree that this is in poor condition?
Yes. I don't think it's not irreparable.
And can you be a little bit more specific? What makes it, in your opinion, poor condition?
There's significant cracking on the walls and exposed adobe on the exterior.
Any other questions for Ramon at this time, board members? Will the applicant or applicants come forward and get sworn in?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Name is Douglas Moss, 2108 Calle Tecolote, Santa Fe, 87505. Good evening, board members, Madam Chair. I think that Mr. Sarazone's description of the property is quite adequate. The significance of the roof being removed at some point with a simple metal shed being put on it, the poor condition of the interior, the cracked slab as well, and just basically the really lack of historic value to the structure itself in its current condition, including its modifications that were done in the 90s. And I think with that, I would stand for questions.
Are the vigas, I noticed it had vigas, are they original to the structure?
That's unknown.
Ramon is indicating yes, they are.
In the most recent HICB, John Murphy suggested that those were probably original.
And what about the windows and the window frames?
They looked to me to be original.
And I don't know, 3 of the 4 members here were on the field trip today. And I thought it was in very good condition, actually. For it being a shed, I think it was, I don't know if the other members that were on the field trip would agree with me, but it was, I felt that it is in good condition. And it does reflect what we used to have antes in that neighborhood. You'd have a simple home, and then eventually they might build a shed in the back, and then have a huge backyard because they were growing crops there.
That's correct, Madam Chair. The reason I call it in poor condition was based on the letter that I received from Bobby Padilla, who went out and inspected it. And do you have any other questions for me?
Board members, any questions or comments? None. And sir, if you want to continue, did you have anything further?
I think I might just add that, there is a significant restoration going on the front property, and that, perhaps with time, the actual usage of property has changed in terms of how the property is to be used in the future, even though many years ago, these were farming communities. And that the board might consider that.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular case? If so, come forward. Yes, sir. Please state your name and get sworn in.
I do, ma'am. My name is Vance Jiza, 1475 Rodeo Road, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505. I represent Mr. Moss and the current owner of the property, Mr. Pat Reyes, as the project manager. I have been overseeing the construction and restoration efforts applied to the current structure in the front of the building. And I've also had to work around and as best I can regard the current shed that we're proposing, the status review and demolition. The question that I would, or the consideration I would proffer to the board as well as you, Madam Chairman, is not only the significant effort taken to restore the structure to exemplary standards, in my opinion, as having experience in construction and restoration in Charleston, South Carolina, one of the oldest historic districts in the country. There has been painstaking effort under review and also on the owner themselves at significant financial cost to maintain the integrity of the structure. That being said, the shed in its current state, while it may appear to be in better than poor condition, is in fact poor. There is moisture penetration and these water issues with the adobe inside the plaster, which as Ramon had mentioned, it's cracking. So it represents a fair amount of effort to sort of preserve whatever integrity may be intended based on the decision today. Additionally, as Douglas noted, the change in use of the property is also something to consider in the fact that it's a very small space. So the utility outside of its intended purpose when it was built is very restricted. So an individual attempting to reside there, develop it for whatever purpose they choose under their right to own the property, it offers very limited return on any sort of investment or significant infrastructure improvements for that building. So with that, I would ask to possibly consider that moving forward. And I stand for any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Stephanie Benenato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe. I haven't seen the building, so I don't know if it should be demolished or not. I don't think these arguments about, changing use of property, there's a big lot there, and I'm sure they'll have some opportunity to add other structures on there if they want. Giving it a status doesn't mean you can't add on to it. And I have to really say that Bobby Padilla is not an engineer, so I'm not sure. The photographs of the outside, though, I have to say, I was wondering if there really was a foundation there. Hearing that there was a slab in there makes me feel that there had to be a foundation. And so again, I wasn't there. You'll have to decide whether you want to preserve what is typical of, what was in Canyon Road or not. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment on this case? Anyone on Zoom?
Chair, no, nobody has their hand raised.
Thank you, Heather. If there's nothing further, Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few comments. First, I actually think this is a difficult case, surprisingly. This is a structure that you don't really appreciate till you go visit it. It's very typical of that part of town. It's quite beautiful in its very modest way on the interior. It's in decent condition. The windows, the vigos, the walls, they really speak to an era that is disappearing. And it's true that it no longer perhaps fits into the evolution of Canyon Road into an arts center, but that's almost all the more reason to protect it, in my opinion, because it really speaks to the agricultural past of that very significant thoroughfare and fields that were behind these homes. However, after looking at the property and then going back and rereading the code and the HICP, I have to say that I think that on a structure that's this small and this modest, that even small changes can have quite a bit of impact on their significance. And in this particular case, I think the alteration, the parapet from a flat roof to a sloping roof, addition of a typical metal roofing on top of that. When all you have is four walls and a roof, those kinds of changes, I think, do have a large impact on the historic integrity. Sufficient that I would have a hard time, I think, at this point, as much as I would like to protect this building and wish the owner would protect this building and leave it there and add on to it rather than, or build around it rather than demolish it. I come to the conclusion that I agree with John Murphy that this would be a non-contributing building in its current form. And I would add to that it's not visible from Canyon Road, at least. It may have some partial visibility from Acequia Madre. Sorry, this keeps falling down. So that's my thought on that. I think we should address that before we get to demolition. We're not doing them both at the same time, are we?
Anything,
Those are my only thoughts on the status.
any other questions or comments reference the status of this building? If not, I will entertain a motion, please.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion. Case 2023-006399 HDRB 650 Kenyon Road. I move that the board retain the status of the structure as non-contributing per staff's recommendations.
Invenu seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
I'm gonna have to vote no because I would not be in favor of demolishing it.
Member Bienvenu,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We'll go on to the next case, reference the demolition. And did you have anything further, Ramon? He has nothing further. And applicant, did you have anything further? Nothing. Anyone from the public? Oh, board members, do you have anything in reference to any comments to make or questions reference the demolition? And I'm going to ask for public comment, and I see a person coming down. It's John Eddy, and he has already been sworn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is a difficult decision because of the fact that when we lose these buildings, we do lose the character of our town, the historic character of our vernacular neighborhoods. Now, I'm one of those people that cry about that, but a lot of people don't. So I have to admit that that's the way it is. My difficulty in trying to protect this building is that I don't think it's highly visible from the public. So its disappearance is probably not going to impact the public that much. I do have to ask the question, whenever this board considers the demolition of a structure, I always wonder if the applicant has to provide some information as to what will be replacing that structure. There have been many instances where those questions were never asked, and the public or the applicant was never required to give an indication of what was to take the place of a structure. This is a different case. It's not a major building that's visible to the rest of Santa Fe, but I would be interested just technically in the validity of those questions being asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, applicant.
That's an excellent question raised, and I certainly appreciate the brevity that goes into the discussion about eliminating an old structure like this on a property, historic property. I'd like to encompass the entire property. The renovation that is being done on the front property, which was originally the Moya residence from, I think, the late 1800s to just a few years ago when my client bought this property, is being restored to such a degree that literally we what's it called, the historic register, that an application is being made. The plaque will be on this building. The renovation on the interior and the exterior of this structure is nothing short of stellar, if I might add. And the shed does have, that I could determine, I saw no visibility from any street of this structure under the standard, fences and everything that exist. And there are proposals being drawn up that will be submitted to this board for an additional structure there, constructed in adobe, much in this, maintaining the same integrity and historic design features that are incorporated in the front structure and incorporated in the historic district. And those would be forthcoming upon this approval.
Thank you, sir. Board members, I will entertain a motion. Yes, member Guida. Oh, yes, Heather, sorry.
Chair Rios, I just want to make the applicant aware with reference to the siding of the existing building. If it were to be demolished, then any new building would have to meet required setbacks. So in short, the placement of the building cannot be replicated.
Thank you. Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in case, I'll make a motion, in case 2023-006400 HDRB 650 Canyon Road, I move that the board approve the demolition of the non-contributing building as proposed, noting that per 14, section 3.14, standards for demolition of historic landmark structures. The considerations are whether the structure is of historic importance, which we've determined it's not. B, whether the structure is an essential part of a unique street section or block front, or that the street section or block front will be reestablished by a proposed structure that does not apply. And C, that the state of repair or the structural stability, this is a building that is in poor repair. So therefore, the motion is to demolish the structure as proposed.
And do I hear a second?
Bienvenue will second, just emphasizing that the reason that I agree with this motion is the second of those standards, which is whether the structure is an essential part of a unique street section or block front. And in this case, it had, because the structure has no public visibility from Canyon Road, that to me is the determining factor. Otherwise, I would be against demolition.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
No.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Next case is located at 501 San Antonio Street. And this is Heather's case, and is the applicant here? The applicant is here. Heather?
Thank you, Chair Rios. I'm going to share my screen one moment. Okay, thank you. The site is located at 501 San Antonio Street to the south of Acequia Madre. Near the entrance is near the Acequia Madre School. The status review is for the casita, not for the main house on the property. So Fabiola de Baca Gilbert was associated with the original construction of the home, which according to the city directory was built between 1934 and 1935. If you take a look at the site plan here, the original garage for the property was located on the southeast corner, which is on the right-hand side of the site plan here. And that would have been concurrent with the construction of the home. It was later remodeled into an office and guest bedroom, different types of uses as well. And a portal was enclosed in and associated with this area. With reference to the second garage that was constructed at a later date, the access would have been off of San Antonio Street at that point. Back in the 1970s approximately, this garage was converted to an office and then enlarged to include a guest house. So originally just a portion of that particular garage was an office. And then there was an addition that was created to the site plan isn't 100% accurate here on, this is from the Historic Cultural Properties Inventory Form. There is an addition that is not consistent with this particular footprint. This is an illustration of the garage from the east elevation, what was once the garage. So there are features that are associated with it that is typical to garage being constructed at that time, with the shed roof and the parapets only on the sides and the front of the building. The addition of the window there on the right-hand side, which would be the north side of the building, that would have occurred during the initial renovations to this property, or the second round of renovations, I'm sorry. And that happened in approximately 1987. So relative to status, the definition of status is such that or contributing status is such that it's located in a historic district approximately 50 years old or older, that helps to establish and maintain the character of that historic district. So although a contributing structure is not unique in itself, it adds to the historic associations or historic architectural design qualities that are significant for a district. The contributing structure may have had minor alterations, but its integrity remains. So with reference to this particular project, it has been altered significantly over time, though there are hints of what it was originally. Staff recommends that the status for the casita remain as non-contributing. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions for Heather? Yes, member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, the packet that we have with this case is for an alteration. Do we just have the wrong packet?
Chair Rios, Member Guida, it was my understanding that this is from a previous staff member, that the status would not be considered, but that's how it was advertised.
Okay.
And so there is some information about the history of the building. And so this in the packet, so the board would have the information available to them to act on the status. And I've consulted with Frank.
Understood. So we're not reviewing the design case tonight.
That will be in the future.
Okay, great. And then could you just restate for the benefit of the board, staff's recommendation on the status?
Staff recommends that the building be designated as non-contributing.
Thank you.
Anything else in reference to board members to Heather? Nothing?
No.
Will the applicant please come forward and get sworn in?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Edward Fitzgerald, 121 Jefferson Street, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm the architect working on this project.
And Mr. Fitzgerald, do you agree with staff's recommendation?
Yes.
Any questions for the applicant, board members? Yes, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Not a question, but more so a request. I think it's fine for this application, but in the future, the application requires for plans and elevations to be stacked one on top of each other, just so it's easy for us to compare side by side. So if you could just do that for future applications, it would.
I'm learning.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Yeah, just next time, please.
Nothing further, board members? Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this project? No one? I will entertain a motion, or unless there's someone on Zoom. Yes, Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case 2023006283 HDRB 501 San Antonio Street. I move that the board maintain the building's status as non-contributing per staff's recommendation.
Do I hear a second?
Aguilar Madrano will second.
And roll call vote, please, Melissa.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next case is located at 1147.5 San Acacio. May we hear that case, Heather?
Yes, Chair Rios, thank you. Just one moment. Let me share my screen. Doing a couple things at the same time. Toggle them. Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair Rios, members of the board. This evening, we'll be presenting another status review for 1147.5 Camino San Acacio, which is located in the downtown and East Side Historic District. This photo was taken in the 1980s, and I would like for you to just sort of take a look at it. This is from the Historic Properties Inventory Form. And then you will see some photographs of the house as it currently exists now. One thing I would like to point out is on the east side, there is no longer a portal here. And then on the west side, there's been alterations to this portal as well. But generally, as to the shape of the building, it remains the same. So this site is located to the north of Camino San Acacio and between Camino San Acacio and Cristo Rey streets. And it is part of what was a family compound, the Tafoya family compound. You can see the site, which is located right here, and you can sort of see the overall chronology of the building as well. And this is the portal that was enclosed. This is the west portal that I was just discussing. And then this is the roof of what was a 1990s addition. So moving back to what was originally the case, this is from the Historic Cultural Property Inventory Form from 1147 Camino San Acacio. The applicant requested that since this is all holistically part of one family compound, that the additional information be provided for this building, but not an individual Higbee. So this aerial is from 1960 and it remained the same in 1966. So as you can see, the original building, which was built in the 1920s, was a freestanding building. And then there was an additional building, which those two footprints have been joined to create this house as it currently stands. So you can see on the south elevation of the home that there have been changes, like the portal on the west elevation, and there is a fireplace now. The also windows have been replaced and not in the same size as the original. This is an illustration of the courtyard, and also just sort of pointing to the windows themselves have since been replaced from the original house as it was built. Also, the Tafoya family compound had sort of a unique feature in their parapets and how they constructed their parapets, and that included a stone parapet at two layers of stone at the top. You can see that at 1147 Camino San Acacio, and it is likely that this is part of the original 1920s building, that this reveal may have been that particular parapet, which is not straight or even. The applicant was kind enough to provide sort of a chronology as to the house and how things came together. And so what is now the living room was originally the house from the 1920s. The second floor, kitchen, and portal were all done in 1973. There is also a bedroom and bathroom that's approximately in the 1970s as well. The separate building, which you see as a study in the pink, and the closet was done prior to 1960. And then, of course, the addition to the east, where the dining room, TV room is that is from the 1990s. And you can see that some of the windows have been replaced as well on these elevations. So this is the portal feature that, or I'm sorry, the parapet feature that I was mentioning to you previously. This was the original Tavoya house that has been one of the original that have been since demolished, but the existing 1147 Camino San Nicasio, as we saw on the site today, still has this feature. So as I mentioned, the alterations include window replacement, removal of the porch on the second story. It was a portal on the east elevation. There's the 1990s addition, the partial enclosure of the second story porch on the west elevation, and the enclosure of the first story portal. And this is a view of the north elevation of that particular property and illustrates that 1990s addition with the larger plate glass window. So staff recommends that since this is not exemplary of the unique features or anything like that, and it does not contribute because of all of the changes to the overall character of the historic district, and recommends that the non-contributing status be retained. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions for Heather, board members? Will the applicant please come forward?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Will McDonald. My address is 488 Arroyo Tenorio.
Well, good evening, Will. Do you agree with staff's recommendation?
I do agree with Heather's recommendation.
And
I
do you
just
have
wanted to
anything
add-
further to add?
Looking at the aerial photographs, there is one from 1973, and we can tell that looking at the original building, it's still the same shape there. It seems that when the second floor was built was sometime after 73. Just as a point there. I don't think there's anything else. You covered it well. But I'm open to questions. And the owner is with us by Zoom if you have questions for him.
So too many changes, unfortunately, that have occurred on this building to change the status. The status remains as non-contributing because of the changes.
That's what I would see, that its character has changed significantly over time and over a fairly recent time. And so I think it should remain non-contributing.
Any questions or comments, board members? Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this case? No one, anyone on Zoom? No one on Zoom? I will entertain a motion, Member Benvenu.
Sure, I'll make a motion. Case number 2023-006394 HDRB 1147.5 Camino San Nicasio. I would move that based on the record as presented and the recommendations of staff, that the structure be maintained as non-contributing.
Do I hear a second?
Guido will second.
Roll call vote.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenu,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you, board.
Will. Next case is located at 1170 Camino de Lora, and this is Ramon's case. May we hear your report, please?
While we're rebooting the computer here, this is indeed case 202306-359 HDRB. And this is a facility that you were familiar with from our last hearing where we determined that it was a non-contributing structure. So This case is the addition of a larger kitchen area and a small addition to the east side. And once we get this going, I'll show you some pictures. Okay, all right. So you can go ahead and advance it. This is the location, Camino de Laura. It's a really nice location and the streets are identified on the slide. It's downtown East Side Historic District. The building kind of presents its back to this Camino de Laura. This is the Camino de Laura elevation, the south elevation. And really the building kind of faces the mountains with a portal, with an existing portal, and there's additional casitas on the property. So can we go forward? The west elevation, also very humble. This is the north elevation that I said it's kind of facing the mountain, and that's the portal that they're proposing demolition and creating a new addition to. Here's the floor plans that have been provided. On the left is the existing site plan, and on the right is shown, indicated in orange, is the additions that are being proposed. Elevations provided by the architect of the proposed elevations once the addition is in place. North and west elevations, again, the same. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D general design standards for all historic districts and 14-5.2E downtown and east side design standards.
Thank you, Ramon. Questions for Ramon? At this time, board members? No one? Yes?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Aguilar Madrano.
Question for Ramon or staff. On these facades, which I believe is the north, I know we allow larger plates of glass when they're under or up or tall, but that only pertains to windows, as I understand. Is that correct? So it would not pertain to doors.
I'm going to defer to Heather. She's probably got a finer code review experience than I do.
Chair Rios, Member Aguilar Madrano, with reference to the proposed windows and doors underneath the portal. Typically, that was permitted in a commercial type of scenario where you have storefront windows. But it has been the practice of the board to also allow undivided windows and doors underneath the portal because of their diminished presence from the streetscape.
Okay, yeah, because the code reads windows, but you're just saying the board as of recently has been also allowing doors.
Yeah, and for many, many years, and its administration is what was considered.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, board members? If not, Jeff, will you come forward, please?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Jeff Sears, 122 Lorenzo Road. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm Jeff Sears. I'm representing David and Ellen Lake, the owners of the property. And David Lake is the architect of this project also. He was hoping to attend via Zoom this evening, but has fallen ill. So he's asked me to certainly answer any questions you may have. And with that, I'll defer to you.
Thank you. May we see the east elevation?
These drawings are all existing. I'm not sure why they're being shown.
That's an existing elevation.
These
That's
are all
existing,
existing elevations. There are colored
Oh.
elevations that show the proposed and existing.
Yeah, on the proposed, that's, okay, because I saw a shed roof on the proposed. Would you talk to us about that? Would you tell us why it was decided to have a shed roof there?
Well, if we can get the elevation up, I think it'd be best to speak to that.
One moment, please. And I'm sharing my screen. Just one moment. Sorry. Sorry. I'm jostling windows here so that Jeff, please let me know. Is that the correct?
Yes.
elevation that you want to see?
Thank you, Heather.
Okay.
So
IT, can you please turn on the TVs facing the audience? We're working on that. Jeff, please feel free to go ahead and answer the question.
there we go. I think it's up there now for the public. Oh, thank you. The drawing there on the north shows the shed. Your question was why a shed? Is that correct? Okay. So the existing portal has a shed, and it sheds to the north as the interior of the building for drainage primarily. The proposal, the pitch of the shed matches the existing pitch of the portal that we are going to remove. And it's to facilitate drainage primarily for water not to fall back onto the center of this building that has been added on to over time, as you know, from our previous meeting here on the status. And there's many small roofs and different roof planes there. So keep water away from that center is the reason. Again, matching the existing pitch of the portal that's there.
In reference to the public visibility of this project, it can be seen from where?
Really nowhere. As elevations, of course, are not perspective views. You can see on the south elevation proposed, which is next drawing, please. Oh, there we go. Thank you. That is the in red, it shows the height, but it's set back quite a distance, as you can see in plan. So in perspective, there would be no public visibility to this addition.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Can we go to a plan, Heather, please? And then maybe if you can zoom into the proposed plan. Yeah. So Jeff, can you just give us some clarification? I'm reading that the portal extends essentially to end kind of where that stone wall is to the north of the living room. Is that correct?
Yes,
But then the wood columns are shown right up against the windows.
in front of the mullions of the windows, yes.
Okay, can you also point out where are the wood columns on the other portal that's off of the entry?
Off of the entry, those are in the wall of the building there. Those are the columns or viga posts that we're proposing to reuse from the demolished portal on the small addition to the lower right there. The new viga posts shown are in front of the mullions on the sliding glass doors. And again, I think this is really an interpretation and is an attempt to reinterpret this portal, of course, in a way that enlarges it for function, kitchen
And
and living room, and then also allows for, of course, all year-round use of this.
And so by the entry, the portal extends to just north of the stairs there, right? So is the portal essentially kind of cantilevering over those stairs since the columns are closer to the house?
You're talking about on the entry
Mhm.
and the go to the the elevation, please. Maybe that helps explain. Yes. Is that, are you asking there, Madeline, on that lower, on the entry there, that roof there, that flat roof area there?
Yeah, so that's less than the 30 inches, that roof from where the portal ends to the column.
No, that goes all the way to the corner there.
I'm just trying to figure out if there's a cantilevered portion, the depth of it, I guess.
It's cantilevered to the corner there that you see to the left. I'm not sure of the exact dimension. I can measure it for you.
Okay.
It's greater than 30 inches. I know that.
Okay, even in the new Santa Fe style, Heather, isn't the maximum 30 inches for cantilever? Even on a roof treatment? Or Ramon, sorry, Ramon, I didn't want to overstep you there.
Chair Member Aguilar Medrano, I will double check the code, but I believe that is
I
correct.
thought it was 48.
That is correct.
30 inches. Okay. Yes, I guess my concerns were the extent of some of the elements that seem to be cantilevered. And then I briefly brought up the issue of we do allow larger plates of glass when they're under a portal, but on the right-hand side of the living room, that's really a pretty minor overhang eyebrow at that point. I don't think that qualifies as a portal, and there's a pretty significant sliding glass door that goes floor to ceiling there. So even if we permitted the doors on the other facades under the door, I think that one is harder to get around because I don't think that qualifies as a portal on that side.
Are we talking about the entry?
So the east facade of the living room, it's just called out as an overhang, and that overhang looks like it's probably 30 inches or so. I'm looking at a plan.
Yes, that one there, yes. Well, no, the overhang goes all the way to the wall in plan.
Heather, can you point to that? Just
Member Aguilar Medrano, what would you like me to?
I guess I'm confused. I'm looking at a dash line that says overhang. So I understood that to be the extent of the roof, but it's only showing, I would guess, 30 inches or less from the right-hand side of the living room. And I only bring this up because it's a matter of, does this count as a portal or not? And therefore, can we permit this larger piece of glass?
Chair Rios, Member Aguilar Medrano, it would not count as a portal as per the defined definition.
Okay, so that would have to be smaller than 30 inches or divided light, or a solid door.
That is correct, and also set back from 30
3
inches from the edge of the wall.
Okay, thank you. And that's all for now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
But traditionally in the past, there has been some leeway for that, which is not publicly visible, but that is certainly up to the discretion of the board.
Rita.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to the applicant, I really appreciate what is being suggested in the design. It's something that I do personally like quite a lot. I even very much enjoy the kind of handwork on these kind of early design drawings for the benefit of the H board and the presentation tonight. So I'm very happy to see those. But I do share Member Aguilar-Medrano's concerns about the review of some of the district standards. I think maybe the staff report's a little undercooked with regard to the north elevation. I'd love that. I think it looks great, but we do have some rules, and the board is obligated to be consistent in reviewing cases. If that were a portal, I would agree that that fenestration with undivided lights would be allowed. If we move to the east elevation, I think the proximity of that large window to the corner not being set back 3 feet, I think is also a concern. There's been other mention of the measurement of overhangs, and I would just recommend reviewing that with staff and really kind of checking, and dotting all I's and crossing all T's. I think also, from looking at, I wasn't on the field trip today, but looking at the aerials and Google Earth, visibility from Communicabra of this property is a concern, at least on the east elevation. I know it's elevated from the street, but I think that the east elevation may be publicly visible. So in general, tonight, I don't know that this is a design that we can currently approve, unfortunately. But I think in the revisions, I think I would work with staff to really kind of examine those limitations that were mentioned.
So the first question is regarding a portal. So you can see the overhang there on the north side. That does not constitute a portal, is that what we're saying? And I don't understand what the definition then is, what is the minimum dimension to create a portal?
I think it's 4 feet.
That's has been my understanding, but there seems to be a lot of interpretation here going on the chapter 14:5.
Say something, Member Aguilar-Medrano?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify that the portion that I was talking about wasn't on the north facade of the kitchen. It was on the east.
So specifically that large window on the east then?
Yeah, that's the one that I'm saying. That I was saying it's probably like a 30-inch overhang at the most. So that one, I definitely don't think we can consider a portal. So that would be subject to either being less than 30 inches or true divided light. And then it would also be subject to the 3-foot setback from the corner.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, I think, no, the north side is definitely considered a portal. I would double check the depth of that just to make sure the overhang isn't greater than the 30 inches. Otherwise, you'd have to perhaps move the wood columns out just so we don't have that much of an overhang.
Okay, so the north side is within the parameters.
Yes, as long as it doesn't have a cantilever over 30 inches.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, possibly those columns would have to move out just slightly to maintain a 30-inch cantilever, but it's set back. The wall of the glass is set back 48 minimum. I'm not sure exact measure, but at least 48 inches, which constitutes a portal then.
I think it would look funny just to pull the wood columns out, a foot or whatever to meet that 30-inch maximum. And, more typically portals maybe are right under the edge of the portal and it's only cantilevered like a foot or so. But you'll have to look at what those dimensions are. And they're not provided here. So I just can't tell how deep that is.
There's two things here. there's the wall, the glass wall that's more than 48 inches back from the edge of the roof.
Mhm.
That constitutes a portal. The columns then are to be set no more than 30 inches from that edge. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, I can read the definitions of portal. If it would be helpful, I think it would. Under the code, a portal was defined as a long porch or portico with roof supported by vertical posts. Portico is not defined, but porch is defined as a roofed space outside the main walls of a structure at street or first floor level, which has a depth of not less than 4 feet from the outside face.
Yes, in that reading, it's supported by the vertical posts. So, which leads me to believe that these posts need to be pushed out further north so that the roof is actually physically supported by them, and that would constitute a portal. And then we could examine allowing larger plates of glass. My understanding is that if the wood columns stay as they are and the roof is purely cantilevered, I don't know if then that is considered a true portal. And then the
What
windows
is,
and doors might be
again,
subject.
where's the definition in terms of the projection of the roof beyond the beam and columns of the portal?
Well, that's in the code, the cantilever, that's discussed in the 30 inches.
30 inches.
Yep.
Okay. So that's a portal can have a 30-inch cantilever.
Heather, do you want to say
Heather?
something?
Chair Rios, Member Aguilar Madrano, you make a good point that there's no depth being met in terms of what is defined as a porch, which is part of the portal definition, is 4 feet. And that's exclusive of a cantilever. Something can cantilever, they'll be on a shed roof, it typically is at least 18 inches. And in this case, it's longer, but as defined by the code, the staff is of the opinion that does not qualify as a portal.
I don't understand.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Heather's comments. This isn't, we're not here to debate primary interpretations of code. That is the land use division and specifically the HPD's responsibility. So this case somehow got to us without kind of checking all that stuff. And I don't think, we should be workshopping that here. I don't think it's a good use of the board's time or the public's time. I would prefer that this case go back and with Heather's guidance, some of these terms be clearly interpreted. One of those being what is a portal? An overhang is not a portal, and what's drawn does not constitute a portal. But land use staff are the folks to interpret that and provide additional guidance.
We still don't understand in terms of the definition of a portal being a minimum of 48 inches deep.
Jeff, I agree that, that there are challenges within how, architectural terms are put into legalese in our content, but
48 inches is 4 feet. That's a very not challengeable number, is it?
that may be the case, but this is not a portal. This is an overhang.
Okay, I'm going to ask for public comment. Anyone from the public, if you're going to speak, come forward.
Stephanie Beninado, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe. At first I thought, oh, this will be easy. It's not visible. It's not contributing. But I do see a lot of problems with this design, particularly the very large full-length wall windows, both on the north and the east. And I can see with the east that, there's very specific design standards that do need to be met. But again, to me, what's being drawn here, which is, kind of hard to follow, really, is not a portal. It's a totally walled window that has an overhang. And my understanding is that portals are open. They're not enclosed. So if the glass part is being considered the portal, it's not the portal. And my understanding is you're not supposed to be filling in portals, existing portals, in the historic zone. But again, this is non-contributing and it's not visible to the street, or maybe it's visible from Santa Casio, did you say, Mr. Guida? But again, I don't think it actually meets the definition, and I don't think full windows of glass really fit into the historic district at all, visible or not.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to speak in reference to this case? Anyone on Zoom? No.
No, Chair Rios, thank you.
Jeff, did you have anything further before I ask for a motion?
So going back to the north elevation, again, what I described as a reinterpretation of the portal that was there. By opening up the glass, you will have full depth all the way back to backside of the living and dining area. So, or living and kitchen area. So, again, as was pointed out earlier, you know, these interpretations in terms of design, you can see there when that glass is opened, that'll be full depth all the way back to the existing wall there on the backside. So it's, I guess, in a sense, a hybrid. It implies a portal by putting in, of course, the beam and viga posts. So I'm looking for direction.
I think you might find it in the motion. Let's, I will entertain a motion. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just since it sounds like we're sort of trending towards seeing you again, I just had a couple quick questions on materials. Obsidian was the color for the windows and doors, correct?
Yes.
How does that compare to the existing?
There's, in the submittal, there was a color chart. I guess it's not available.
No, I'm talking, you had a color chart of all the existing windows and doors?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. That's my mistake then.
It is essentially the color of a dark gray, or similar to the stain that's on the beams and columns of the existing house. There it is right there. So that the Cabot semi-solid cordovan brown, and then the obsidian is below that, just lighter gray.
Yeah, I was wondering about how that compares to the existing windows and doors.
It compares to the existing portal beams and viga posts. The existing windows and doors are painted in a light green on the casing, and the casings around the windows as well as the window frames.
Okay, board members, let's hear a motion, please.
Madam Chair, I'll take a stab at a motion. Case 2023-06359 HDRB 1170 Camino de Laura. I move that we postpone the case to a date certain, allowing the applicant to meet with staff and revise the design to better meet the applicable district standards for the downtown and east side historic district. As noted tonight, the north elevation, the overhang does not yet constitute interpretation that we've seen before of a portal, and also the east elevation has a number of fenestration elements that are out of compliance with the with either the divided light, if indeed this is visible, the divided light rule, or the distance from the corner rule that is applicable. The applicant is encouraged to meet with staff, review the standards more clearly, and update the design and resubmit.
Is there a second?
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Is there anything further to add to the motion? Nothing further. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Sears. We'll
Thank
see
you.
Again, do we need to indicate a date certain?
Chair Rios,
Or will you work with the applicant to do it as soon as he can?
staff will work
submit?
with the applicant and it'll show up on the.
I'd like to set a meeting with you, please.
Certainly. So the next meeting that Mr. Sears can actually be on, meeting all legal requirements for advertising, would be April 11th.
And I'd like to set a date certain meeting with you to review this.
I will call you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We go to the last case this evening. It's located at 303 East Alameda Street. And Heather, this is your case.
Right. Thank you, Chair Rios. My PowerPoint should show up here pretty soon. There it is. So the site is located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Paseo Peralta and East Alameda. It's also known as Inn of the Alameda. This particular building is listed as non-contributing due to the date of construction between 1985 and 1986. It was around that time frame that the Inn of the Alameda came into existence. The only historically contributing building on the property is the building that is located immediately adjacent to Paseo Peralta and Alameda at that intersection that is designated as contributing. Much of this was done in the 1980s, including this building here. So the applicant is requesting an elevator addition on this corner where you can see the arrow pointing in this corner niche area in order to accommodate for better guest access. And, although access is being provided elsewhere for hotel guest rooms, this will help the building to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. That act was not in place back in the 1980s when this was being constructed. And so therefore it was not required at that time. So this is an illustration of the site plan illustrating the scope of work with the existing on the left-hand side and what is being proposed on the right-hand side. The permitted height in the streetscape is approximately 16 feet, which is lower than the height of the existing building. So if this were to be constructed today, this building, there would be an exception required, but in this case, it is existing. So the construction of the building was indeed prior to the height ordinance that regulated based on streetscapes that was adopted in 1996 and 97. The primary historic elements in the streetscape include the St. Francis School, which is across Paseo Peralta on the west side, and then the historic single-story building, as well as multi-family residential. I think it's a line of apartments that's to the east. And then there's office uses to the north that are single-story. Alameda Parkway and the Santa Fe River separate the site from the other side, which would be Canyon Road or the back of Canyon Road. And so those are all single story as well, just for reference. So the current building height is 28 feet, 4 inches. The elevator overrun height would be the top of it would be 32 feet, 4 inches. So the applicant is trying to keep the overrun as low as possible and still be able to have a functional, elevator. There have been windows in sort of the lobby, so you can see this is the elevator mass here. And there's an elevator lobby. And so the windows have been added on that portion of the building where it is feasible in order to break up an overall character of the facade. One must remember that this particular addition is on that west corner of the building, which is not adjacent to the street. So you can see here on the view from Alameda, the elevator addition will be in this location. So you will see the mass of the elevator. You will see the windows that project out, but it will be approximately 4 feet higher than the existing roof height here. The applicant is also proposing a little cart storage shed for the housekeeping and valet functions of the hotel that is located on that as part of this scope of work. And here's another view as you're facing to the east of the existing building, illustrating the location of the elevator. I'm sorry. And then also on the side here where that tree is the general location of where that elevator would be. This is the parking lot for the building to the rear. So with reference to the exception criteria, the staff finds that the applicant has met the criterion to not damage the character of the streetscape by placing the addition as far back as possible on the site. It is required to prevent a hardship to the applicant or injury to the public welfare. The operative thing is here, while the applicant acknowledges in the letter to the board that there have been concerns with guests not being able to access the property, the injury to public welfare is not being accessible to all in this particular case, just able-bodied people to climb stairs that can climb stairs. It strengthens unique heterogeneous character by providing the full range and a thoughtful design of the design options were considered, and it is a thoughtful design. It is due to special circumstances that associates with the construction of this building prior to ADA standards. The special conditions are not the results of the applicant, of the actions of the applicant, and it has the least negative impact with its location situated on the building's north elevation. So the recommendation from staff's recommendation is, as the exception criteria have been met and addressed and impacts are mitigated, staff recommends approval. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions for Heather, board members? None? Applicant, would you please come forward, or applicants?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Wayne Lloyd, 321 West San Francisco Street. Should I add anything?
Yes, please. You have the floor, Mr.
Well,
Lloyd.
I think Heather covered it pretty well. When John McHugh and I designed this in 1985, the ADA standards weren't as strict as the building code presently enforces them. So I think a strict interpretation would have required this elevator back then. It is not a building code. It's an accessibility code. And I think under accessibility and ADA requirements, someone could make complaints, if not legal allegations, that they can't stay on the third floor. So not only is this accommodating to existing guests, but I think it's actually required by ADA. So it complied in 1985. The ordinance was 30 feet. Heather mentioned that back when Mary Kraskowiak messed up all of the height ordinances by doing this height averaging, which now, as you can see, it's 16 feet. That's neither 2 stories. It's a great 1 story, but it's not 2 stories. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just define how many stories we could put where instead of height averaging? Height averaging is average. I'll stand for questions. One other thing, as you can see on this photograph.
You better take the mic.
The elevator doesn't actually set on the east facade of this. It sets back a little bit. So while we're saying we're requesting a 4-foot height board addition, I'm not sure based on it setting back from this west wall that you can actually see it when it's done. And we probably could have done that in 3D, probably should have, but we didn't.
Wayne, how far back is it from the street?
Go to the floor plan.
I don't have the floor plan. Let me just change screens. Just one moment.
Madam Chair, I can answer that question. Per the site plan, that edge of the site plan is about 112 feet. I would guesstimate that the elevator is set back about 90 feet from Alameda at least.
Yes, but I'm talking about from the west facade all the way back. It is not right on the front of the west facade.
Right, but I asked the question how far back it was from the street. And he already gave the answer. Yeah.
And we're about 11 feet back from the
Yeah.
facade you mentioned, Wayne.
So in that 3D, I'm not at all sure you'll be able to see the elevator.
Other questions, board members, or comments? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Wayne. Relative to your options for elevator type and mechanism, does this minimize the overrun?
I think so. It's a ThyssenKrupp elevator. And they have a required overrun. Now, in terms of design options, well, the other one would have been along Alameda at the hallway because the hallway runs north and south. So I think we put it at the least possible.
Oh, that's clear. But I'm just, depending on traction type or piston or, does this give you the smallest overrun?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anything else, board members? Public, it looks like 2 people are ready to attack the mic.
Stephanie Beninado, PO Box 1601 Santa Fe. I think that you're adding 4 feet on to the height. It's back from the street. It's set back from the west side. I hope that it will be stuccoed over and look like part of the existing building. Although I have to say that I don't think it really strengthens unique heterogeneous character, excuse me, I can't say that word, character of the
Genius.
district. Nor do I actually think I think that no one could actually sue you under ADA because if you have reasonable accessibility to the building, I don't think you have to give accessibility necessarily to every floor. However, I think you should approve this. Eventually, this would go to the city council, and if they approved Peter Comas's elevator, which actually is visible from several places in downtown on the backside, not on the plaza side, but on the backside, and it looks like something landed on the building. The design is so not in keeping with our historic downtown. At least I think that Mr. Sheps here and his architect are being sensitive to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Eddy again. I would echo Ms. Benenato's statements. And I have to say, whenever I see elevator mentioned in these packets, I get really nervous. And glad to say that I don't think that this is egregious. And I do think that you should pass it. And I'm glad that Ms. Bidonotto pointed out that there have been a couple of applications for overruns on elevators in town that have really, really damaged our streetscape. This does not do that. I'm glad to see, but it is something we need to be really careful about. Thank you, Madam Chair, board members.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. And I suppose no one else and anybody on Zoom. Thank you. I will entertain a motion. Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think this is a nice project. I'm not sure it's ADA necessary either, but I don't think that's really the crux of the issue. I think it's entirely appropriate that a commercial building such as this be entitled to have reasonable accessibility. And this is a very, I think it's very sensitive design to accommodate an elevator of this type. And I couldn't agree more with the comments that were made about the one on the plaza, which is extraordinarily impactful.
I didn't do that one.
All right. And the city council did, in its wisdom, approve that proposal. Fortunately, it's not visible from the plaza. But at any rate, this is very nicely done, in my opinion. It's consistent with the architecture of the building. It's appropriately set back, and it has the appropriate massing for this kind of structure. So I personally have no difficulty at all finding that the exception criteria have been met. And if there's no further discussion, I would make a motion.
Please do.
Okay, in case number 2023-006393 HDRB 303 East Alameda East Building, I move that findings be entered that all required exception criteria have been met for the reasons given in the staff report and given at the hearing tonight, and that the application be approved.
Do I hear a second?
Guido will second.
Roll call vote, please, Melissa.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I just did the math. That was
Thank you.
37 years ago when I did that.
Oh, my God.
Oh, we're,
Hi, Joe. How are you? Yes. Okay, thank you. Next, we will go to discussion items. Do we have anything?
Chair Rios, I do not.
Okay, matters from the board? Mr. Guido, you will not allowed to speak.
what?
I will limit your speaking to 2 minutes.
I just have a quick question for Heather. So this was a case in which there were design exceptions that the board considered. Does this go to governing body for a full hearing again, like the St. John's case did?
Chair Member Guida, no, it will not, because it is a height exception
Okay,
and the H board has authority over height.
got it. Thank you.
And I just want to encourage board members, please submit go around looking for nominations. And please submit yours to Heather. I don't want to be the only one submitting. I know you just have to drive around. And I know most of the cases are on the east side, but try to pick cases that are in all historic districts. And our next meeting is going to be March 28th. And looks like John Eddie wants to say something. Oh, okay. And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Guido moves to adjourn.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
And roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, and good night.